I'm John Carpenter, and we're watching Assault on Precinct 13, which is my second feature film. I shot this movie in 1975. It was released in 1976. And basically, this is a exploitation action picture modeled after Rio Bravo, which is one of my favorite westerns with John Wayne, Ricky Nelson, Dean Martin. That was directed by Howard Hawks, basically men trapped in a jail against forces of evil outside. I just took the basic premise and reworked it for modern-day Los Angeles. This movie was extremely low budget. My first film had been made for $60,000, and I believe this one was about $100,000. And we shot it in Panavision, my first Panavision film. And the musical score is one that was done on synthesizers before they had become what we know of today. They were individually. There were several banks of synthesizers that you had to tune every time you wanted to do a new sound, so it took a long time. The film editor is John T. Chance on this film. And John T. Chance is John Wayne's character in Rio Bravo, Sheriff Chance. So that was my offhanded way of saying this was a kind of an homage to Rio Bravo, although in many ways it resembles Night of the Living Dead, strangely enough. The very small but dedicated crew and cast, mostly unknowns. We worked very hard. And you'll notice Deborah Hill's name is script supervisor. And this was the first time I'd worked with Deborah. And we went on to become a somewhat successful producing and directing team. This is a low-budget film, so you're seeing credits over black, and the credits go on for quite a while. But we need to stretch it out. As always, in low budget, you try to shoot as little footage as possible and make the movie as long as you can. Now we're going to move into the body of the film. And the first sequence that's coming up was a sequence that was shot after we had completed principal photography. It was shot with a handheld camera, and this is down at USC with some school friends. And we needed a way to kind of get the movie off to a big bang, so there's a gang of youths here, and they're going to be attacked by supposedly the police. Now, the use of superimposing the date and time and so forth is to try to give it a somewhat documentary feel, like you're there. It's a technique that's kind of gone out of fashion now. I've used it since on Christine, but I enjoy it. I'm using a kind of a brace and walking behind them. This is me operating the camera, and it's not particularly steady. We used the Steadicam, the Panaglide, in Halloween a couple of years later, but this was before then. So you can see what a handheld camera bounces around and really looks like. And these gentlemen are about to get killed in the opening sequence so that we can get into the plot of the film, which involves a gang of basically an urban gang taking revenge for these killings here. These are not stuntmen. These are all college kids kind of throwing blood on themselves and trying to make it look like they're doing a stunt. They did a good job. Nice lighting by Doug Knapp, who was a school chum of mine. Very, very talented cinematographer and camera operator. And now we're into our narration from a radio, and we're going to really open the film. And this is Los Angeles Ghetto. This is shot down by the Century Freeway. This is South Central Los Angeles. One of our problems in this movie was making this area look dangerous, because most of Los Angeles looks fairly sunny with palm trees, and it's kind of benign. We had a real hard time making it look dangerous. We somewhat succeeded, because this area is pretty devastated. At the time, in the 70s, there were gangs, but nothing like they are now. Here we are in an interior. This is a real kind of gang hideout with actors. and phony prop guns. Nice little dolly move here. We're going to come over and open the film with a kind of a multiracial gang. Rather than going for any one particular gang, I decided to include everybody. Now, you might notice that Frank Doubleday's there on the left. He played in Escape from New York. This is the blood oath that begins the movie. For all the Western fans, this might be reminiscent of a kind of an Indians preparing to battle, and they're all going to be blood brothers. They're going to mingle their blood in that bowl. It was back in the 70s. This kind of bloodletting in this movie was not maybe as shocking as it is today. Phony knife with blood dripping from it, and here we go, phony blood in the bowl. Kind of a nice way to begin. Nice and tasteful. West Los Angeles, and Saturday, 4:50 p.m. really is a street over in Hollywood, which is a very beautiful street. This is Austin Stoker, one of our leading characters, a very nice man who plays the lieutenant who's on his way to the precinct. Again, it very much resembles a Western. I forget the street this is right off of Hollywood Boulevard, I believe. Nice slow dolly shot. A lot of this movie is very slow, and he takes his time taking his keys out. We didn't have too much time to shoot this sequence, so I just kind of let it run. He rolls down the window. Let's get it going here. Closes the door. As an editor, I tried to cut this a little faster, but having no more coverage, I was unable to do it, so we have to watch him take off. Again, very, very beautifully shot by Doug Knapp and Panavision. It's my favorite aspect ratio. And now we're on a car mount, and we're traveling down. I forget what street this is. Imperial Boulevard, I think. Right down in South Central L.A. Strangely enough, we had no real problems while we were there. Very, very friendly people. You see now the houses in the background, although some of them are boarded up, they were bought by the city for the Century Freeway that was eventually built. It still does not look too dangerous out there. Not as menacing as, let's say, in New York or a ghetto in like South Bronx, where you have crumbling buildings and the architecture looks can look menacing. This is very bright and sunny and pretty. So we have to hope we get to nighttime soon. Now you see the lady in the car there is trying to figure out what's going on because we have a camera mounted on this car. And we're driving right along. This part of the plot involves, this is his first night out, so he's going to confront what he thinks is basically a routine job, but is going to end up fighting for his life. Kind of a traditional Western plot. We only had one accident with our car mounts. One of the actors drove a little too close and hit a parked car, but nothing too serious. This is a real jail that's been closed down. It's over in near Pasadena. There's Charles Cyphers, who I've used many times. I used him in Halloween and Escape from New York. Makes a pretty good cop. He's got nice long sideburns here. And we're about to meet the leading character, who is a criminal. His name is Napoleon Wilson. I guess some people could say he's a precursor to Snake Plissken in Escape from New York. Darwin Jostin gave a really tremendous performance as Napoleon Wilson. An unredeemed killer who says many poetic lines. And here he is, a nice little dolly in. We actually utilized a zoom, which I don't ordinarily do.
This is Napoleon Wilson. Got a smoke?
No, this is dialogue about cigarettes throughout the movie. Is more of a reference to Howard Hawks, as my favorite director. Hawks spent a lot of his career doing cigarette gags. If you see The Big Sleep or To Have and Have Not, you're going to especially see it in there. So I have this character asking for a smoke a great deal.
Sure could use a smoke. You understand me, Wilson? Mumble a little bit. I get the general idea.
Again, you see the coverage is very conventional and simple because we really didn't have a lot of time to shoot the film. And I had to choose my angles extremely carefully. Nice little hit there. Darwin goes over. Kind of broke a stage line there, but I was young at the time. Stage line is which direction the actor's looking off in. I believe Chuck Cyphers is looking the wrong way, but now he's looking the right way. It's a split between Darwin and the other character. Now we're outside for a nice long dolly shot. Again, the pacing of the movie is rather slow and resembles kind of an old-fashioned Western. We were pushing very hard to get the movie done. A lot of the actors, like the guards, have long hair, which of course you wouldn't see in real life, but the actors refused to cut their hair.
Hey, what? You got a smoke on you? Yeah, I'm not gonna give it to you.
And a lot of what you're seeing is me learning how to utilize Panavision and how to make it work. If I was doing this scene now, I would speed it up a great deal. It would speed the entire movie up, but at the time it seemed like the right thing to do.
Okay, if I stretch a minute. You gotta chain me to a seat and drive for hours. We get to Sonora, you're gonna chain me in a cell. Maybe for as long as...
Nice little stunt coming up here, where Napoleon Wilson gets his revenge on the sadistic and evil jail keeper.
You know, Wilson, I'm gonna miss you.
This was a day of a tremendous fire in Los Angeles, and if you look at the sky, it appears to be somewhat yellow, pink, and red. It's because flames are burning a hillside someplace. He gets it wrapped around him, and he gets pulled down. Gentlemen aren't holding their guns correctly, but that's all right. And now the bus takes off, and we're going to cross-cut to another scene. Again, we're in South Central Los Angeles, looking very, very benign and pretty visually. As a director, you're always trying to find a location that backs up your subject matter, and in this case, we tried to make it as desolate as possible. These homes, many of them are closed up, but still it's kind of a bright sunny day, and I don't take it too seriously yet. Now we introduced other characters, father and daughter who are driving, paranoid white middle-class man who's driving through a ghetto.
You're going to say, Margaret, I want you to come up and live with us now that Fred is gone.
I want you to come and live with us now that Fred is dead.
Kim Richards was the actress. She's really cute and fun to work with. She had been in several Walt Disney movies, Escape to Witch Mountain. Martin West had acted on a soap opera for many years.
Then I'm going to run away from home.
She'll never buy
And this is the sequence in which we rammed the mounted camera into a car, but with very little damage.
You'd rather eat than get your nanny out of this horrible neighborhood.
Well, I know
The movie is taking its time to set itself up in terms of the characters and where they're going
Seem to find that street.
and what they're up to.
Why don't we ask them?
Bon Air Place. I think it's down here just a couple of blocks.
And essentially what you have is three angles. You have a close-up on the two actors, a two-shot, and then they play the entire scene with a POV. And again, economy of filming, because this movie is extremely low budget.
We're not in any trouble, honey.
Now we really are down near the area where the freeway went in, and there's a lot of devastation here. This was all just standing around. Here come our bad guys. We have to set up the idea of automatic weapons and silencers because part of this movie is an assault at night where the gunshots aren't heard. Again, the use of music has bridging us to kind of a very slow, moody beginning, which takes its time. It's much more reminiscent of old-fashioned filmmaking than today's fast action. Little car mount cut here. As the bad guys put their silencers on. Frank Doubleday makes a great bad guy. When we were discussing the part, he said, usually I play a man with a gun. I'm going to play this time a man who is a gun. Almost like a machine. An assault rifle he's putting together there. And unfortunately, this is a movie that rather reflects what's happening today. Now, this is the Venice Police Station, which is closed down and used in numerous shows. I had to restrict my angles on it because all around is basically Venice, California, which does not look like the ghetto. But as Austin Stoker pulls in here and gets out, looks around, we have to cut to his point of view of the street. So we cut from Venice, where he's closing the door. And this is South Central Los Angeles. Back to Venice. In front of the police station, a very beautiful building, built in the 30s. Up comes Austin. Now he has to look down the other way. We're going to set up this station is isolated. South Central Los Angeles. Now as he looks across the street, we're going to cut to Ventura Boulevard. That's the RTT parking lot. So we have 4 different locations utilized here. And now as Austin walks in the door, we're going to cut to interior of soundstage. This was shot at what is known as Raleigh Studios now, was Producer Studios then. And there's my first real set, somewhat reminiscent of a Western again, but it's fashioned after the Venice Police Station, which looks very similar to this. This is Henry Brandon, actor who played Scar in The Searchers, John Wayne's favorite Indian, as he called himself. A very, very nice man. An old pro. Here comes Laurie Zimmer. This is her first movie. Very nice young lady, very good actress. And on the right there, you will recognize Nancy Loomis, who played in Halloween.
Hello, Julie.
Hello.
Things are quiet,
For a change. You took over at the right time.
apparently. When are you moving?
They shut off the phones and the electricity at 10 tomorrow morning.
That sounds pretty fine.
Would you like some coffee, Lieutenant?
Yes, thank you.
Just made some fresh. I'll get you.
Thanks.
This was the first movie that I had ever directed in which I had to maintain a schedule. Dark Star was made over a period of years where we would go out and shoot and then come back and raise money and then shoot again. This was all done in one straight period. And I wasn't quite prepared for how exhausted I'd be. Now we're going to go in and have a sequence, a dialogue scene in one of the rooms. Again, it's a very stately, slow beginning to what happens later. We learn more about Austin Stoker's character. We learn more about her.
For over 30 years. I'm sorry. 2 sugars. 4 blocks from here.
And as a film editor, I have myself to blame for the pace of the movie. I should have sped it up, but this was the first time I was learning how to cut Panavision, so I was new at it.
When he went to call my father, I carved something on the top of his desk, the letter opener. For months, I was afraid he might see it and come after me.
Why did your father send you in?
Visually, I tried to balance each frame. Again, much in the way Hawks used to balance his frames, except Howard Hawks never used Panavision, and I really enjoy the widescreen feel. It's just something that I respond to. A scene like this, where the characters are talking, basically seated position, you can utilize the screen and keep them focused, the audience focused on the characters. And we have another dialogue scene coming up.
Be right there. By the way, no one took me out of Anderson when I was a baby.
Originally,
I walked out myself when I was 20.
the lieutenant goes over to talk to the commander of the police station, who's about to leave, and the commander is going to tell him a story that chills him. But the actor who was playing the commander hadn't received his script in time, so he didn't know the line, so he cut it out. So basically, you've got an abbreviated scene here.
What a night. We've had a 312 every 15 minutes. 12 stolen cars, 3 burglaries, 8 aggravated assaults. There's not even 8 o'clock.
And again, you've been spending many minutes here in a soundstage with people talking. In low-budget filmmaking, you kind of have to do that sometimes to get around what you don't have and the time you don't have.
Could be the sunspots. Pressure on the atmosphere. I heard it on the radio.
7 o'clock. I'm going
I recall one incident that happened during the making of this scene in which the actor is loading the shotgun, and unfortunately, during one of the takes, he was loading a full load of blanks that misfired right in Deborah Hill's ear, which upset her to no end. Now we're setting up a loaded shotgun inside a locked case. You may ask why. That doesn't make any sense. Of course it doesn't, but I use it later on.
I don't understand why this place is still open.
And I had to establish it in the scene. So off goes the precinct commander and leaving our lieutenant in charge for the evening.
That show got around fast.
Here comes our bad guys again, and there are a few sequences in the movie that now perhaps you wouldn't be able to get away with. The window comes down and out comes a gun. Our bad guys are going to sight various folks sitting around. I don't know that they would let us do it now. With the violence having escalated so much, on the other hand, it's rather benign, but yet the audience is waiting for him to pull the trigger. What you're doing is trying to build a little suspense here. You have very few angles and a point of view. He decides against it. Now we're going to set up the ice cream truck, which is one of my favorite sequences in the movie. He's an ice cream man in the wrong place at the wrong time, and is terribly aware of the danger he's going to be in as here comes our bad guy car. And we established that he's nervous, and then he's being circled, almost like a shark circling. And he has a gun. We now find ourselves in a bus coming into an on-ramp on the Foothill Freeway outside of Los Angeles, which is used for a lot of movies. It was in the old days. We're coming up to a dialogue scene with Napoleon Wilson. Charles Cyphers is going to come up and talk to him because he kind of admires him as a outrageous bad guy. This is one of my favorite dialogue scenes in the film. I think Darwin did a great job in this movie. He acted in several things in the 60s and 70s.
Well, I never got a definite answer.
I don't smoke.
That's a definite
Again, this sequence resonates the Western kind of feel to the movie.
When you're in my position, days are like women. Each one is so goddamn precious. You always end up leaving you.
And then I notice, in watching the movie again and listening to it, some of the dialogue is the product of a young man's writing, and on the other hand, it's unfiltered by Hollywood cynicism, so it has its own appeal.
You're not a psychopath. You're not stupid.
It was a very difficult sequence to light because we're traveling in a bus. It's hotter than blazes inside. It's hotter than blazes outside.
Everybody asks me the same question. I always tell them the same thing. First time I ever saw a preacher, he said to me, son, there's something strange about you. You got something to do with death. Being real young, I believed him. Turned out he was right.
That's no answer.
I thought it was pretty good.
Where'd you get a name like Napoleon?
I'll tell you sometime.
Now we're about to wheel into motion the clanky plot device of having one of the prisoners become very, very ill, so the bus has to stop at the deserted precinct in order to get everybody together. It clanks a little bit now, but I could have perhaps devised a better way of uniting all these characters in one place. But perhaps not. Tony Burton plays the other convict. Tony was a boxer, all-around tough guy. You could recognize him from Rocky films. A very good actor.
How long till we get to Sonora?
Another 6 hours.
We gotta stop. What's the closest precinct?
Anderson.
And now we begin the sequence of the killing of the little girl, which today would give this film an X rating, which is still rather shocking. And having kids of my own now, I'm not certain that I would do it this way again, but it is a powerful way to turn the plot. This was one of the few sequences in my career that I storyboarded every shot and shot the boards. And occasionally has a look, a storyboarded look, and yet it still seems to flow from image to image without you being too aware that it's pre-planned on paper. Oftentimes they get a rather sterile feel when you do that. Here comes the shark circling again in the rearview mirror. And there goes the car. Down a hill, turning a corner. This this was a real area in south central Los Angeles. Again, it's not particularly threatening or menacing, but we managed to make it look somewhat desolate.
It's late, sweetheart. I'm closed.
The music's still playing.
And the car has disappeared. Again, you're watching a storyboarded sequence. The first time I utilized a board to exactly shoot what I had drawn. And I might do it differently today, but
Vanilla twist.
the scene seems to hold up. Eventually here, she's going to get her ice cream cone. And our ice cream man is going to be menaced in a way that, again, I don't think you can do in modern films. Because perhaps the violence now is so serious. The trick of killing little Kim Richards was to put an air hose inside her ice cream cone and fill the air hose with red
Vanilla twist.
and simply blow it on her dress. There we go. She seemed to have a good time dying. She was a little frightened at first, but after we did it once, she thought it was fun. Definitely not a Disney movie, but we've just killed the little Disney girl. Now the father is going to discover the terrible crime. The styles of the time were long hair and bell bottoms, which marks it as a 70s film. And his shoes have kind of high heels on them.
The truck under the dash.
The stage direction problem right there, but I was just beginning. Sometimes you don't worry about stage direction, whether an actor goes off the right way or not, especially in an action scene. So now the brutal murders are done and the father is out for revenge. Back to the Venice police station at night. The relocation, 1977 Ellendale Place. That location was the first apartment that I had in Los Angeles when I moved here from Bowling Green, Kentucky, so I thought I'd pay a little homage to it. Ellendale Place is actually near USC. We're shooting here in the Venice police station, and in comes the bus. And now we have our main characters gathering together. The movie is driven by random violence, chance, and fate. These characters have, in many ways, nothing in common, except that they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. The elements of the gang are basically this random force that comes out in the night in some murky revenge. Perhaps it's a little prescient, but I was operating, again, under the assumption that we were going to cross a Western genre, basically with a Night of the Living Dead horror movie.
If you just get back on the main boulevard, go about 10 blocks.
I don't have a lot of time to discuss it. Now, what that man has in the bus is infectious, and all of us will have it. And the sooner we put him in the holding tanks, and I get on the phone and call a doctor,
Shooting assault on Precinct 13 in the night sequences also taught me a very important lesson about Southern California. It really isn't warm at night. Some of these evenings we would shoot, and all-night shoots, were freezing cold. Occasionally you're going to see actors in their breaths. The longest shooting day I ever had as a director is coming up. You'll see part of it. Inside the jail here, we shot inside for 24 hours. We came in one morning at 8. We left the next morning at 8. It was a very difficult lighting situation, very slow. We had too much work. And it was an endurance test. I also learned that shooting through bars and being able to see anybody through the bars is very difficult in real life. That's why often jail cells are designed with wider bars to allow the camera to peer in. Our two main characters meet each other. And Napoleon Wilson responds to the kindness of the lieutenant. Bishop really has nothing against Wilson. I think Darwin's character, Napoleon Wilson, is a criminal who respects professionalism and kindness of others, but he's never really treated that way. Very difficult dolly shot down this tiny corridor with a Panavision lens. We stop for a second to look in. I had never shot for 24 hours before, and let me tell you, it was pretty grim.
I have to admit it, Wilson. You do have some fancy for a man in leg irons.
Venice Police Station at night. And now we cut to the San Fernando Valley, over by the airport, the Burbank Airport. Unusual shot mounted low in the front with a headlight. A little cut there as we move out into a field, a deserted field where we can have a little action scene. Frank Doubleday's character knows no fear, of course. He is a machine. And dies like one. And now the revenge being complete, Father doesn't get in his car and drive away as any normal human would. Instead, the writer writes that he walks away. In making a low-budget film, very often you're required to do more jobs than just one. All the sound effects that you hear in the film, and all the Foley, in other words, the footsteps and the coin jingles and the little incidental sounds that you put on, were all done by myself and Tommy Wallace, the art director, and Jim Nichols, the assistant director. All of us working basically as Foley loopers, and did a fair job. Now here comes Martin West running by the RTD parking lot across the street on Ventura Boulevard and into Venice, California. And now we've set the trigger for the film. All the characters are together. trapped inside a police station, a place you assume to be safe, now is not.
Who? Wait a minute.
Not of action for a closed-down station.
Ease up a little, Cheney. He can't talk.
He says there's somebody following you.
Come on. Look, operator, I have been waiting 10 minutes.
Now, as he's looking out of the set, we're cutting to the RTD parking lot for our point of views, with the lights pulsating because they were mercury vapor, I believe. Gave it a somewhat eerie feel.
There's nobody out there. Let's try to. Cheney, help me take him to the captain's office.
Hello. I just got cut off.
So now we find out that the phones are dead, and pretty soon we're going to find out that this place is being slowly isolated, much like today's home invasion scenarios where a gang will cut off electricity and power to a house, telephone lines, and then come in and rob them. It's kind of a standard Hollywood way of getting people in the dark and making them afraid.
Thanks a lot.
He was mumbling something about his daughter being shot.
Where?
I don't know. He still can hardly talk.
What about the phone?
Now we're in the dark. Big issue with the cinematographer and I was
The streetlights are still
whether to have emergency lights on. I preferred not to keep it creepier. So we have a very dark, side-lit movie. The real shock in the film, coming up here as he gets killed by a silencer, dies extremely well from all the Western films he was in.
Cheney just fell down.
And now the siege is basically on.
Still alive.
But there wasn't any sound.
They're using silence.
I suppose in some respects the movie resembles a disaster movie, which was a genre of films very popular in the 70s. People trapped in a certain situation of earthquake or burning building. And now we see the Indians or the youth gang moving up on the fort or the police station. Again, the Western motif. And as these characters are leaving, they're about to get killed. We had one injury on the film, one of the squibs, which is a bullet hit that just went off, triggered by the actors themselves. One of the actors put his hand in front of the charge and burned him a little bit, but it wasn't too serious. Charles Cyphers gets 2 nice squibs in the back, with the dust hits on the wall, and now we're off and running. Again, this is part of the 24-hour day I shot inside the Venice police station. One of the grimmest shooting experiences. This is a scene about who's in charge and who respects who.
You're not gonna let us sit in here. At least take these cuffs off. Hey!
We can just barely get the actor's face through the bars. And here we have the silencer attack, which is another scene I enjoy a great deal, simply because I had never seen it before in a movie, where you have a lot of wanton destruction of glass and a lot of squib hits. We used real glass, couldn't afford candy glass, and also looks so much better when you hit it. Tommy Lee Wallace cut this particular sequence, did a very good job with it, as well as the assault that's coming up in a minute. A lot of cuts in these shots to make them go faster. Occasionally you can see it cut, but mostly we get away with it. There was one. Saw the frame jump. Down goes the glass. Kind of a nice low-budget action scene with nothing much going on than squib hits. Last little hit there on the paper. A little pause. Silence. And we know things aren't very good. Now, visually, the movie is going to be bound pretty much inside this soundstage, inside this set, for a while now. Another concession to the low-budget idea, but also, in terms of keeping people trapped, the idea of characters in one location was very appealing to me. And as in any siege movie, the siege stops for a bit, and there's a moment of pause and quiet. Again, reorienting ourselves to the point of views from outside the police station that we know it's isolated, it's desolate. To my shock, I went to see this movie in a drive-in when it was released, and this entire sequence, because there are no bright lights, was very dim on the drive-in screen. I learned a lesson. It looks very good in interior theater, but on the drive-ins, the ambient light kind of washed it out. It was a shock. I was depressed.
Hey, come on. We got a right to know what's happening. Hey!
Left out again. Life just seems to pass us by.
Side 2 here begins with a reconnoitering scene between the law enforcement officials left at the abandoned police station. Assault had a rather interesting release when it came out in 76, 77, I don't recall which year it was. In America, it was treated with as basically a bloody exploitation movie. When I showed it in Europe at the British Film Institute, it got rather good reviews and began, luckily for me, began my career. In terms of a director who deals with suspense and action, for that, this movie will always have a tremendous place in my heart. It was another labor of love, much like Halloween and Dark Star. I didn't take a salary on this, although I was paid a little bit of money later. The movie was released independently. Perhaps it was too much of an old-fashioned Hollywood film for the audiences of the 70s who expected a little bit more jive out of their movies. But it is very rooted in 40s melodrama and films of Howard Hawks. Nancy Loomis's character with her hair up even looks like a couple of the actresses in The Big Sleep. Now we're going to begin a siege sequence that took us quite a long time to put together, but turned out very well. And we're setting up the shotgun, which we saw was loaded earlier. And we're going to eventually get to my ripoff of Howard Hawks' Red River, where Walter Brennan tosses the gun to John Wayne. In this case, Austin Stoker tosses the shotgun to Darwin Jostin.
You'll just look outside. You'll see they're gone.
Look, I can't get this open.
We have, again, indirect lighting, blue light coming from outside, top light on the actors. A very moody setting, kind of perfect for suspense. But on our low budget, you don't really get to see much out the front. We could never really do a reverse angle, so there's just a black soundstage out there.
We're in the middle of a city, inside a police station. Someone's bound to drive by.
Nancy's a very fine actress who went on to star in Halloween, along with Jamie Lee Curtis and P.J. Soles. Did a terrific job. Did many plays.
Doesn't look like they cut off phone lines. They're still connected to the pole.
For an action film, this movie takes a long time to set itself up, but once it gets going, in the action scenes, they seem to burst out of nowhere. That was the idea at the time. Again, kind of a cribbage of Howard Hawks' way of making films. He seemed to have a lot of slower scenes, and all of a sudden, the violence would erupt. And now as our characters watch, we see the police station being surrounded by what looks like an army of assassins in the night. Actually, a lot of crew members and college friends running around the parking lot on Ventura Boulevard. Trying to make it look like a lot of people are massing out there. I remember taking this movie back to my hometown of Bowling Green, Kentucky, and showing it to a lot of my old high school friends and college friends and high school teachers. I don't think they knew what to make of it. It was a little too violent for Bowling Green. Now you're going to have the ritualized condemning to death of the station. The bloody sheet. The gauntlet is dropped. The jar of blood is thrown. It's death to those inside. The economy of shooting again is evident in the precision of the angles that I had to use and the simplicity of them, because we didn't have a lot of time to make the film. The acting and the lighting and the design is extremely well done for $100,000. And we took the movie very seriously. Now we have the betrayal from the frightened Nancy Loomis, who says, "Give him up."
Well, don't give me that civilized look.
Again, I think as a writer, I was utilizing a lot of melodrama and adventure movies that I had seen, specifically Howard Hawks films. As the siege finally starts to take off here. The Indians attack the fort. Here they come across the street pushing cars. And we're off into the action sequence. Tommy Lee Wallace, Jim Nichols, and myself took turns cutting this sequence, various areas of it. Back to the 24-hour shoot in the jail. Laurie gets shot in the arm here, and the squib really didn't work. It didn't show on screen, so we had to do an insert to show you that she was shot. It was slightly confusing. And there's an actual optical here. Right there. There's the insert. Now we know she's been shot in the arm. Because before, none of this read. Insert. Ouch. Big time insert. My first fight sequence. Whoa. Broke a mannequin's arm and we're off and running. And now comes the flower pot through the window, toss the 30-30, or Walter Brennan throws the shotgun to John Wayne from the wagon sequence in Hawks' films Rio Bravo and Red River. Only we do it with a shotgun here. Have it, of course, locked to add suspense. You can actually see some of the walls shaking there on our set. Here they come, and the shotgun toss catches, fires, down they go. It's a more dangerous stunt catching and shooting that than it looks. These are full loads we're using. And if you stand in front of a full loaded shotgun, even though it's a blank, you can be killed. We did not have the use of professional stuntmen in this movie, so again, we're lots of college friends and crew members. As I recall, one of the guys who gets shot through the windows later went on to win an Academy Award for his sound recording. Matter of fact, I believe that's him coming in now. And there he goes. All the sound effects, the footsteps, were all recorded by the three of us, Jim Nichols, Tommy Wallace, and myself. So we didn't have any money to hire anyone to do that. More action as they climb through the windows. The Western aspects of this are fairly obvious. Well, now it seems to me that perhaps this resembles the siege on the fort in The Unconquered, the Cecil B. DeMille picture with Gary Cooper. But the Western influences are obvious here. One of the characters who's blown out of the window is Joe Wu, who owns Joe Wu's famous Chinese kitchen on Lankershim Boulevard and is also a film editor. I think that was our production manager who went out the window there. Laurie's a good shot. Steely nerves. Now the siege is over. At least this part of the siege is over. Our characters regroup. And we have an interesting situation. You have the law enforcement officer with a gun, and you have two criminals with a gun. And these people are forced to survive together as opposed to attacking each other. Perhaps an unreal situation, but in Hollywood melodramas, always a good one. Nancy's character is dead. And the theme that's playing on the soundtrack is one that is one of my favorites from the film. Although perhaps it's dated now, it has a little bit of jazz influence. And also sounds somewhat reminiscent of Jerry Goldsmith's score for Rio Lobo. in a Howard Hawks movie. Arthur Knight, a film critic and a teacher at USC, told me after seeing this he thought I was more copying Don Siegel, which I found a great compliment. Don Siegel's a tremendous director, but Siegel had a lot more energy than I did at this time. This movie's extremely stately, simple visually. A lot of economy is used. When you're working on a low budget, even a dolly shot, such as this one, that moves across the whole stage, following Bishop as he walks, is a difficult shot to pull off. Doesn't look like much now, but it takes time out of your schedule. I believe we shot this movie in under 20 days. I don't remember exactly how many. It was extremely fast. I often wondered why the characters never went upstairs to the second floor. And the real answer is because we didn't have a second floor. We couldn't afford a set. So we kept them down here. Moving the old Coke machine in front of the door as a way to quickly barricade. Doug Knapp used a slight fog filter on all this sequence in addition to the indirect and moody lighting, just to give the set and the actors a slight glow, slightly soft. So this sequence is not tack sharp, but it gives it an older feel to it, almost as if you're watching an old film.
This time I know somebody is. There'll be squad cars here in 5 minutes.
We're introducing various plot elements that are going to be used later. And now as I look at it and contemplate it, as a writer, I might have done things differently. I believe it's a propane tank. I'm not sure what it really was. We're going to utilize that later on in the picture. Now we have a dialogue scene. Again, utilizing the Panavision frame in its most direct way. You have a two-shot, trying to balance the frame with the actors. Seeing this movie without the Panavision would cut off the edges, which is something that gives it its style, the width of the frame. I've always noticed that many paintings, many works of art aren't squares, but they're more rectangles. Panavision is the ultimate rectangle. Spreads across the screen.
From a distance, the street looks normal, like nothing happened.
Like nothing happened? They gunned down 5 police officers.
More dialogue as our characters discuss what to do and how to get out of their situation.
Where are the bodies?
Trying to utilize empty space and claustrophobia to create suspense in the audience. By today's standards, the action in this film is extremely slow and sporadic.
Maybe they got the good fairy to help them.
You really are a smart ass.
But it seems to take some of its power from the fact that you're not assaulted continually by a siege, but it breaks out in spurts.
Drag old Starker away.
Being an independent film,
Promised to tell him something.
I was allowed complete freedom of making it. It's not the kind of movie that a Hollywood studio would make today or then.
An attack on this building. What I want to know is, what started all of this? Came running in here.
Jesus Christ.
30 minutes ago. All of this?
Here we go.
One man?
Don't forget the cholo. They delivered it to
That was the fun of Assault on Precinct 13 for me. In addition to being a learning experience, directing actors, using Panavision, I got to make a film that is unique in many ways. It resembles an old-fashioned Hollywood movie. The sequence we're watching now is a dialogue scene that perhaps you might remember from westerns or melodramas from the 30s and 40s. The characters are confronted by the fact that this is a blood oath and they're going to fight to the death. Reminds me a great deal of the Dawn Patrol and some of Hawks's early films dealing with heroics. In the beginning, I always wanted to be a studio director back in the 30s and 40s. I enjoy melodrama and adventure. And I enjoy character scenes like this one.
What do they see? Empty street, empty police station.
Maybe somebody from the new precinct will come by.
In the meantime,
The characters are discussing what to do with their situation, and we're going to move quickly into another Hawks area, which is the cigarette gag. Hawks, throughout his career, used the cigarette gag and often gestures and habits, visual, physical gestures between people to indicate character.
We're all together. I've been shot once tonight.
Our characters wear their heroics on their sleeve, but it's probably because of my youth as a writer.
I just wanted to say one thing to you before you jump out that window.
Now, Napoleon Wilson is going to enjoy her heroics. I think he responds to anyone who has courage.
Five other police officers and your sick handcuffed friend.
And naturally, the audience is asked to join along. Will he kill her? No.
I go through all that and his gun isn't even loaded.
Because the gun is not loaded. On the other hand, she didn't know that. And Darwin Jostin thinks that's an admirable trait, and we're now moving into to have and have not land. Laurie's eyes are lit. She's shaded with a Venetian blind. She's going to light a cigarette. And finally, our character Napoleon Wilson will be rewarded.
3 rounds. Lee?
2 shots. If there's any spare ammunition around here, I don't know where it is.
Laurie was cast, and I directed her to act as the kind of typical Hawksian woman, tough, direct.
Anybody got a smoke?
And as the cigarette is lit, you will notice the halo around the glow, which indicates our fog filter. I believe it was a quarter fog, maybe an eighth fog. Ah, there it is. Almost like old black and white. If you bleach the color off your set, it might resemble a black and white film. A pause in the siege, and we move forward in the story. 2 policemen looking like they're right out of the 70s. Actually looking like 2 actors who won't cut their hair, driving along. We shot this sequence in the San Fernando Valley on an extremely long night.
Jesus Christ. We got a war going on down here. We can't find the damn thing. This is Unit 7.
So basically every part of Los Angeles stood in for South Central LA in the ghetto. We're talking the San Fernando Valley, Venice, California, Hollywood.
Make another full circuit, suggest backup vehicles and helicopter surveillance. Over.
I believe they're cruising down Ventura Boulevard at the moment.
It's that damn Saturday night overload. This is Unit 7.
The characters in the movie, in reality, violate all police procedure, as I was not familiar with police procedure at the time as I was writing the movie, but it conforms to Hollywood police procedure of the time. Again, the use of the superimposition to give you a sense of time and place, of time going by. We're going to begin the escape route sequence where somebody tries to get out and bring help. The manhole at the Venice police station. Our characters are maintaining their Western tradition.
I gotta tell you, I don't know how to hotwire a car.
They seem fearless, filled with courage.
Between me and Snow White.
Shit! Shit!
What's wrong? We haven't flipped a coin yet.
I'm gonna lose.
And they have to figure out who is going to make the escape. Tony Burton's character always loses. And we are foreshadowing the fact that he's probably going to bite the dust in a while. Our two men use a unique way of deciding who wins and who loses.
I told you I'd lose. Goddamn it, we're gonna do it again.
Hey, there wasn't time.
How come she's on him?
All right, if I can do it with one arm.
Still no sign of them.
There's one shot I had to reshoot the next day here. A close-up of Austin Stoker giving permission to Darwin Jostin to take Wells downstairs. Austin came to me and said, I wouldn't let him just walk away. I'd make him ask permission. And although it put us behind schedule, I agreed with him. Right next door to the soundstage that they were just on is a very small corridor set with a boiler room at the end. Again, Doug Knapp's ingenious lighting in a very confined space. An unusual police station in that there's a convenient door to crawl out to the sewer system and up to the manhole, but
What the hell's the difference between this?
sometimes in Hollywood films these things happen.
No difference. You stop me then. Why not now?
One thing. When you get out of here, make sure you call the cops before you take off for the border.
Darwin Jostin and Tony Burton are bad guys in the best B-movie tradition. Honor among thieves. But we get the feeling that perhaps Wells is moving out to his doom. Working on this soundstage, when I first walked into the set, it appeared to be gigantic. But viewing the film now, visually, the place looks very small. But try to keep the camera moving as much as possible. Characters moving to give you a sense of size and space.
That basement's not a bad place to be if they come at us again. The only way in is down that long, narrow hallway. We might be able to hold them back. A couple of minutes.
You'll be trapped down there.
Interestingly, this was one of my best reviewed films in terms of character development. As I see it now, there are a lot of dialogue scenes, a lot of working out of situations, A lot of indications of character that seem to slow the movie down, perhaps for modern audiences.
Maybe you've been associating with the wrong people.
I've been with policemen for 5 years.
By today's standards, we would have
Enough to grow hair on a rock.
been much further along in the plot and much more would have happened. However,
I believe in one man.
if you view this as an older film, even perhaps older than the 70s, it begins to make sense. The wooden manhole cover comes up. Naturally, that's an impossible thing to do with a steel manhole cover. And out comes Tony in a second. His escape, of course, is doomed, but we're hoping he's going to make it. If you watch carefully as he slides the cover back, it's going to bounce. Blank.
Oh, you son of a bitch.
They've seen him.
Another shock element coming.
Save it for us.
As Tony makes it to the car, breaks in. And we think perhaps gets away. Hot wires it, takes off. And there's a slight echo of a scene that I did later in a movie called Halloween, where there is somebody in the back seat. Traveling down an alley, if you can see above there is the Universal Studios sign. We couldn't quite get out. He thinks he's made it, but lo and behold, he hasn't. I believe I copied myself and played the same scene in a car in Halloween with Nancy Loomis getting strangled by Nick Castle. Our heroes are in a desperate spot.
Too bad, Wells.
We're going to be closing in on the climax of the film very soon.
We better get down in that basement. If we're out of
There's really no place left to hide for our characters.
we're out of luck. Take a look.
As the final siege is about to begin. Again, it has influences of the Western, and a lot like the Alamo. I probably saw too many Westerns as a kid. The ending of the film was patterned after the heroics of Westerns. The relationship between the cop and the convict. Down at the end of the long hall, there's no way out. We didn't have the money to show the burning and destroying of the police station, so we did it with sound effects. And by this point in the shooting schedule, we're running out of time, so the director has to hurry and is playing a lot of these sequences in master shots.
What have you used to hold him back with?
Anything we can find. Still have the gun?
Kind of final moment here before the last siege.
Save him for the first two assholes who come through that vent. You're bound to see Wells come up out of the manhole.
What do I use on the
The characters are driven by their admiration for each other and their admiration for courage. The point I've been making over and over again in the film. And the man who wove the plot together is nothing but a useless zombie on the floor.
Just one?
Inconsequential and random.
No, there are other things. But at the moment, this one interests me the most.
Senseless violence comes from
Why don't you climb through that vent and take
the random nature of the universe, I suppose. But our characters stand against it.
One is a
And if there's a theme of hope in this film, it's that you can survive the night and survive the final onslaught.
Very least of our problems is we've run out of time.
It's an old story to me. I was born out of time.
So now we prepare for the big battle, but there's one last chance. Trap them in the hallway and hit that gas tank. Kind of a silly device now that I think about it, but at the time it seemed to work.
I stand in the doorway with my rifle. I shoot the flares. They ignite the tank. We blow the hell out of everybody in this hallway.
And what's going to keep it from blowing the hell out of us?
You hold up that sign in front of the door for cover.
Now our two characters have a plan. Maybe they can survive.
Can't argue with a confident man.
Let's go.
But here are two cops arriving. Empty, deserted police station. The irony of it all.
Dark, quiet, and deserted. Request instructions. Over.
What are those cars going over there?
The movie slowly unfolds, takes us back through familiar territory. But viewed through the eyes of the two cops, everything looks peaceful. Everything has been cleaned up. There's no blood. There's no violence. So the police just drive on. And naturally, for some reason, every time I'm out shooting a night scene, it has to be the most bitterly cold night in Southern California.
We don't hear a goddamn thing.
As this one was. And now we're going to crib another little sequence from Rio Bravo. Dean Martin walks in the bar, chased a killer in there. There's no killer, but he notices blood dripping in the glass. So what do our cops do? They hear something that sounds like rain, and the blood is dripping on their hood, on the roof of their car, from a man hanging from a telephone pole. It's a terrible device, but again, one that seemed to echo Rio Bravo. There's our production manager hanging there. So help is on the way. Can our heroes hold out and survive? Again, as the sound effects begin upstairs, please keep in mind that we had no budget nor time to show you what's going on.
Set the goddamn place on fire.
This is it.
Let's go.
So instead, we listen. Final glance between our two, and we're off. As we dolly slowly with the warriors holding their shield in front of them towards the end of the hall, they're to be beaten back. And the plan is to shoot the tank and have it explode. Unfortunately, what they hadn't planned on is they're going to set the building on fire, and the smoke will obscure our hero's shot. Can he make it? More Hawksian dialogue. More sound effects.
Being a cop, I figured you'd get around to it eventually.
did you come to be named Napoleon Wilson?
I'll tell you sometime.
When will you tell me?
Maybe in a minute or two.
And the charge begins. Difficult scene to shoot. As originally scripted, this attack scene went on much longer. We simply didn't have the time or money to do it. The set was going to be bigger. We simply didn't have the money to do it. But as it turns out, it's effective enough. Although by today's standards, the low-budget nature of the film shows through. Can Austin hit that tank? Of course he can. He's the hero. A cheap effect. And here come the police. Basically what you have is a little smoke and a couple of police cars pulling up and a red light going off to indicate that the cavalry has arrived to save our heroes. And one of my favorite shots is coming up as they're searching the police station for any survivors. Down the long hallway past the charred bodies. You're going to see our heroes emerge out of the smoke. Extremely melodramatic yet powerful and fun image. I believe they're going to come out here. There we go. They don't make them like this anymore. Probably a good reason for it. We're going to wrap up the show with the characters, which is where we started.
Anybody got a smoke?
Again, this is a movie that owes much to Howard Hawks, to the tradition of Western movies, the old tradition of heroes, strong women. The object of the entire thing is wheeled away. Truly an inconsequential character.
We have a stretcher for you, miss.
And goodbyes are being said.
Miss.
Napoleon Wilson is a great tragic character. You know, he's irredeemably condemned to go to jail, perhaps for murder, we don't know. But still, he has survived through the night, and Bishop's character is not going to let him be shackled and taken out as a common prisoner, but they're going to walk out like heroes.
Get away from him!
We're going to end with a final repartee and a final dolly shot down the hall. We'll bring up my theme again. 5-note repeating theme. Seemed to capture the mood of the film and the characters.
I have moments.
We had little money. We had lots of aspirations, lots of dreams. We made the best film we could. And it's fun to look at it once again. Thank you for watching. I'm John Carpenter.